Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 23rd, 2022 meeting of the General Obligation Bond Housing, Human Service, and Homeless Subcommittee. I hereby call this meeting to order. We have interpreters today to provide Spanish translation. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, my name is Elsie Duarte, and along with my colleague Mario Barajas, we will be servicing as interpreters in today's meeting. I will now introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días, mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y junto con mi colega Mario Barajas estaremos sirviéndoles como intérpretes en la reunión de hoy. Al momento de hacer un comentario público, de favor le pedimos que hable despacio, con claridad, y deténgase después de cada pocas oraciones para interpretarle de la manera más completa posible. Gracias por su atención. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your important service. We do have all committee members in attendance with Member Janovich on the remote. There will be a public comment period during item number 3 on today's agenda. The 30 minutes has been reserved for the public comment if it's needed. I will decide the duration and time limit for each speaker based on the available time and number of individuals registered to speak. If you're attending in person and would like to speak, you will need to sign up at the kiosk located at the entrance to the council chambers before item 3 begins. If you're attending virtually or watching a recording and would like to speak at a future GeoBond committee meeting, please note you will need to register at least 2 hours prior to the start of the meeting. You may register to speak at the Phoenix.gov/bond meetings. Our first agenda item is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. They were quite lengthy. I hope everybody had a chance to read them. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
So I have a motion from Member Centers and a second by Member Feaster. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Okay, we're good. The critical task for today's meeting is to discuss, if possible, is to reach an agreement on the rank-ordered list of projects that will be put forward as a recommendation to the Executive Committee. Following our last meeting, staff circulated a survey to committee members, and we will be seeing the results of that survey today as a starting point for our deliberations. It is important for committee members and the public to understand that those survey results do not represent the committee's final recommendation. I encourage committee members to be advocates for the projects they feel are important so that we can make informed decisions. We will continue to receive more input from the public today as well to help inform the subcommittee's recommendations. In the event we are not able to reach agreement today, we have the option to continue our discussion to the meeting scheduled for October 7th. However, that will be the final opportunity for the subcommittee to agree on the recommendations, and I really hope that we do that today, so I'm hoping we get there. Item number 3 is the discussion of rank-ordered list of projects, public input, and subcommittee recommendations. Staff will present results of the project ranking survey. The subcommittee may discuss and approve a recommendation to the General Obligation Bond Executive Committee. Item number 3A, staff prepared a presentation on the results of the voluntary ranking exercise that was completed by the subcommittee members. I want to acknowledge that subcommittee member Swanton has declared a conflict of interest with the Choice Neighborhoods project, and he abstained from completing the survey. Following the presentation, I will give subcommittee members an opportunity to ask general questions about the information presented, but I ask that we hold off on deliberating until we hear the public comment period. And so now we'll proceed with the presentations. Any comments or questions from the members for the staff? Oh, we'll have the staff presentation now. Sorry.
Thank you,
Please.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'll just turn it over to Adam to provide the presentation from BNR.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We'll get the presentation. Is the presentation up? It is up. Okay. Just the agenda of this presentation, we're going to do a quick overview of the charge of the subcommittee, just to remind members and to remind the viewing public. We'll take a quick review of the projects that the subcommittee identified for its ranking exercise, go over the summary results of that ranking exercise, then, as the chair suggested, following public comment, open up for subcommittee to discuss, ask questions, and begin their deliberation into the recommendation. So the subcommittee is tasked with developing a rank-ordered list of projects that cannot, in your opinion, be deferred to a future bond program and should be included in the subcommittee's recommendation. Additionally, the subcommittee has been asked to recommend funding levels for each project in the recommendation to the executive committee. Please note that the executive committee and city council will continue to receive public input as consideration of the GEO bond program moves forward this fall. So as a reminder, the needs prioritized in the capital needs study that was provided by the city manager totaled about $650 million. The city fiscal capacity for this GEO bond program is $500 million, so the initial funding gap covering all subcommittee areas is about $150 million. Those numbers do not account for any needs that have been identified by the subcommittees or brought to subcommittees by the public or local organizations. So at this stage, the overall funding gap has increased to more than that $150 million. Just as an illustration, if all subcommittees did an equal reduction to achieve that $150 million gap, this is where those numbers would fall. For housing, human services, and homelessness, the starting point from that capital needs study was $61.7 million. If we were to do an equal reduction, if the executive committee were to do an equal reduction, that would put the housing and human services and homelessness funding level at $47.7 million. I want to emphasize that this is just an illustration. The executive committee has not provided this type of direction, but just to give members and again the viewing public some context for where we're at in terms of moving forward to achieve that $500 million target. I'm now going to discuss a little bit about the process that the subcommittee used for its initial ranking exercise. Again, as our chairwoman mentioned, the results of this exercise are not binding. These were intended as a starting point to help facilitate discussion for the subcommittee. The questions asked were to start with a rank order list of projects. The subcommittee identified several projects. I'll review that momentarily. Put those in rank order, identify which projects you believe should be funded at a higher level, identify projects that you believe should require less funding, and then identify any projects that you believe should not move forward as part of this bond program. So the Housing, Human Services, and Homelessness Subcommittee identified 9 projects for its ranking exercise, as you see them populating in interesting order there, but apologies for that. 4 prioritized needs that were originally part of that capital needs study: the Affordable Housing Property Preservation Phase 1, Cesar Chavez Senior Center, Choice Neighborhoods Housing Development Gap Funding, McDowell Senior Center renovation. Also from the capital needs study, the subcommittee asked to include 1 future need project, the Parsons Center for Health and Wellness expansion. And then the subcommittee identified and proposed 4 new projects for consideration in the ranking: the acquisition renovation of property for congregate shelter, affordable housing development gap financing program, acquisition renovation of property for non-congregate shelter. This is the hotel conversion concept. And finally, innovation in affordable housing. Again, just an overview of how the survey was conducted. We received responses from 7 of the 9 subcommittee members. We're going to display the rank order based on the median response, and in the event that 2 projects had the same median result, we then use the average as the tiebreaker. We also will be displaying the counts for the number of subcommittee members that selected either more or less funding or do not fund. So here's the initial results from the ranking exercise. I will discuss this table briefly to orient the subcommittee and our viewing public to the structure and layout of the table. I'm then going to move to another slide that has the projects in the same order, the result of the ranking, but includes the funding information. So going left from right, you can see that the survey rank affordable housing property preservation phase 1 was the highest ranked project. The median for that project was 2. Its highest rank was 1st, its lowest rank was 6th, and the average was 2.43. Just running down the ranks, the projects here, after affordable housing preservation phase 1 is acquisition renovation of property for congregate shelter. 3rd was Cesar Chavez Senior Center. 4th, McDowell Senior Center renovation. 5th, Choice Neighborhoods Housing Development Gap Funding. 6th, Affordable Housing Development Gap Financing Program. 7th, Acquisition Renovation of Property for Non-Congregate Shelter. 8th, Innovation in Affordable Housing. And finally, Parsons Center for Health and Wellness Expansion. Again, I'm going to move to the next slide. This has the same projects in the same order, but here you can see the funding levels for those projects that had been identified. 2 of the projects that were proposed by the subcommittee did not have identified funding levels. That was intended to be a part of a subsequent discussion. Those are the Affordable Housing Development Gap Financing Program and the Innovation in Affordable Housing Program. Moving across that table, you can see the number of committee members that felt a project should be funded at a higher level, a lower level, and then should not be funded. And then finally, on the far right, you see the running total based on this rank order. With that, that concludes the prepared presentation. As our chairwoman mentioned in her remarks, we are certainly ready to entertain any general questions about the survey exercise, but our recommendation would be to defer any discussion or deliberation of your ranking decisions until after the public comment period.
So at this time, I'll take questions and comments from the committee members. Member Swanton.
I just had one question. If you could pull up that slide that shows the running total. The running total didn't change after you listed the gap financing category. Is that because there is not a dollar amount associated with that category?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can take that. Member Swanton, we didn't have a dollar amount assigned to that. The subcommittee did not provide one at the time, so that is correct. That's the reason.
Other questions or comments at this time? Yes, Member Centers.
Yeah, as we're looking at all of the different categories, I know we're putting them into large buckets. There's been a lot of kind of discussion on these pocket shelters scattered around the city. Would any of these categories hit the pocket shelters? Where would those fall in this category, or would they not fall at all?
I turned my mic off instead of on. Madam Chair, member centers, that would likely fall under congregate shelters. Because in general, with the pocket shelters, and I think you've been hearing somewhat about the iHelp program and in churches, and generally, 9 times out of 10, those would be congregate, so not separate rooms, not non-congregate.
I have some
Yes,
information.
Member Vidalis.
Thank you, Chairwoman Devine. Subcommittee, I did not complete the survey. Was gathering information from the housing director, Titus Matthew, and director, deputy manager, Gina Montes. We had a meeting last week, and they did provide me with some additional documentation for the capital needs assessments for each property. And I see that it's ranking number 1 right now, as what the committee has initially voted. But through my research, 4 the capital need assessments were provided to me. And out of those 4 assessments, 3 of them were recent in January of 2022. However, Santa Fe Apartments was completed in July of 2018. And kind of my assumptions when looking at the initial data were just verified by these documents. So if you took time to read those documents, you would see that there's capital requests beginning as early as this year, 21-22. And the 4 properties that were provided for those capital needs were Cypress Manor, Windsor Villa, Santa Fe, and Camelback. And I'll just start with Cypress Manor. It shows that there's an immediate need of this year of $122,760. Next year, there's a need of $297,000. The year following that, $437,000. And then when the bond funding would be available, another $278,000 in 2024, 2025. So the annual net income for this particular property is bringing in $147,148, and so there's some proof here to show that the buildings are generating enough income to take care of their current needs for some of these properties. There was further questions I had, because it's the same thing for Windsor Villa. Windsor Villa is bringing $310,000 in net income each year. Their first need is about $224,000, which is this year. So there's over $90,000 excess that could be utilized to fund those current needs. I won't go into the other 2 because it's the same thing. It just kind of proves out that there's enough income coming in from these properties to support the necessary repairs. I heard Director Titus saying that they utilize these funds to support administrative costs of the housing department, and it's difficult to make a recommendation to approve these as bond projects when they have the current necessary capital to improve the properties now. If the City of Phoenix properly funds the department and out of the general funds and other funding, so they're not so dependent on these assets to support that department. I'm only bringing this to light because we have to prioritize. And if we're number 1, if you guys gave the most votes, I didn't feel competent enough to vote on that without doing some additional homework. So I've done that for the committee. At the end of the day, you guys we will all vote, but I had to bring that to the table for everybody to acknowledge what's actually there. And if I'm wrong, I don't think Titus is here, but I don't know who's here in his stead. Maybe you could help clarify if the documentation that was provided to me is correct.
So thank you, Member Vidalis, for your comments. I know that Director Matthew is out of town. I don't know if you want to address that, or if we're just we're taking that as comments, and I appreciate that. We are, this ranking can change.
Right.
We have the complete authority to change the ranking once we start deliberating. And and I appreciate the information. I'm sure the committee members will take that information. I think at our last meeting and in the minutes, I think that we did kind of defer to the city staff to then determine which were are there 16? There started 19, there were 16 projects now, and that the staff, those are 4 projects, and I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate your taking the time to meet with the Department of Housing and to get that information, but I think there are 16 projects, and at the last meeting in our minutes, we had given that to the city to then prioritize which projects in that category, because it certainly would not cover all the projects in that category. And we have, I know there's another member that didn't have a chance to do the survey, so we have full time to go ahead and re-rank these with the new information you provided. The recommendation is that if there's no more comments, any other comments or questions, that we go to the public comment period so that we hear their input before we begin deliberating.
Madam Chair, my comment would be based on the information that was provided by the subcommittee member. I think I definitely need to hear a response to that, and I don't know if you want to hear that now or later, but there needs to be a response on the general philosophy for how this is funded and the operating costs and general purpose fund and all of that. Housing financing and funding is complicated, so we need to understand that before we rank.
Deputy City Manager Montez, do you want to go ahead and have someone
Sure.
address that?
Of course. Madam Chair, Member Chapman, members of the subcommittee, Member Vidales, in terms of the costs and the cash flow of these projects, there are multiple properties in addition to the 4 that the member had the assessments for. We gave him the full assessments that we had. Our intention would be to complete assessments on the other properties as well. And understanding that yes, the funding does go to support the operation of those properties. And part of the administrative cost is the property management as well. So to say that it's going just to support the administrative costs of the housing department is not how I would describe it. I would describe it as in order to administer those properties, you need staff to manage them. So not only the property management, but all the behind the scenes that has to happen in terms of operating the department. The philosophy as far as the funding is that the properties are intended to support the cash flow to support the properties as much as possible. Because we are serving very low income, the vast majority are below 50% of area median income. We have held the rents at an affordable level for those residents. And so as a result, it gives us less funding, less cash flow for some of these major capital projects. And so we do see a need as staff for the opportunity to go to the voters and request some additional capital in order to make those improvements as needed. As far as and part of that process will be to do full assessments on the properties and identify where the priorities are. So to take, one property, it is our professional assessment that we do need the funds, that it will support the cash flow that's already existing for these properties, and maintaining the city's portfolio that's non-HUD funded is an important priority for us and staff, and it is our recommendation that it be considered for funding.
Can I give a point of clarification on that? Those numbers I shared are net income. So that's after expenses are taken care of, property management and all other expenses. So Cypress Manor has $147,148 in net income. Windsor Mills has $132,000 in net income after expenses. The Camelback has $252,460 in net income. And Santa Fe has, I think, a revised amount now, but it's $142,213. So just for clarification, that's after all expenses are done. This is net.
Just one follow-up clarification, Madam Chair. Ms. Montes, on the administrative cost, is it my understanding that all of these properties are managed by property managers? The administrative costs for these properties, are they managed by property managers or is it city staff?
Madam Chair, Member Chapman, they all have property managers.
Okay.
Correct.
So-
And Madam Chair, just, we have another member also online that's interested in commenting when we're done. Thank you. Sorry, apologies.
Well, that's okay. I just wanted to be clear that the administrative cost is going to a property manager and not to staff. I'm just
No,
trying-
it's going to staff as well.
Okay,
So, yes.
okay, thank you.
Member Janovich, sorry, I didn't, I'll pay more.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. I'll just raise my hand, not a problem. Sorry I could not be there in person. Really quick to follow up on the conversation. Did we talk, I thought we talked last meeting about needing some reserves as well, Mrs. Montez, unless I'm talking about a different project, because I don't know that we'd want to be in a position, I don't think, where you're using every bit of the reserves that you have in the portfolio. And I think we need to take into consideration looking at the portfolio in its entirety for all of the properties, because I would assume some are making profit, some are not. So it's just dependent on each of the properties. And do we use any of the profits from certain properties to fill gaps with other properties as well?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Member Janovich, that is correct. The portfolio is taken as a whole, and on the specifics of the particular, just the asset management in general, although Titus isn't here, I do have our Wendell Holmes, our Deputy Director over Asset Management, if the committee would like to delve into the details of it, but that is correct. That is, it's as a whole. And the
Thank
comment on
you.
the reserves is correct as well.
Any other, thank you, Deputy City Manager Montez. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question for the asset manager. In July of 2018, Santa Fe was given a physical needs assessment, and they found that there was an immediate need of $2,629,275. Were those, oh, I'll wait till he comes. Good morning.
Morning.
So my question was, in July of 2018, there was a physical needs assessment completed on Santa Fe that showed there was $2,624,275 in immediate need. Did the City of Phoenix and the Housing Department address that need, or is that part of what's being requested for the 2025 bond or 2024 bond funds?
I can't address that specifically as I was not here at that point in time, but I do believe that several of those measures are being attended to at this point in time.
And Madam Chair, with respect to Santa Fe Springs, we did receive $1.4 million from, to specifically address some of the immediate needs for Santa Fe Springs. And that was in the budget, last budget year.
Thank you.
And I did hear that if this, any of the projects that get moved forward to the executive committee and they make their final selection, that there's continued comment period after that. So if it gets moved forward, even as a project, there'll be that opportunity. Any other questions? Then at this time, we'll go ahead and we'll go to the public comment period. We will now move to the public comment period on our agenda. Will the city attorney please explain the rule of public comment in the GEO Bond Committee meetings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public may speak to comment on the General Obligation Bond Program. City Code requires that speakers present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, or personal attacks on members of the public, council members, committee members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose their opportunity to continue to speak. The committee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending claims or litigation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one virtual speaker and registered today and 5 in-person speakers. So we'll begin. We'll start with the virtual participants. When your name is called, your audio device will be unmuted, and you may begin your remarks. At the conclusion of the virtual speakers, we will then invite in-person attendees to the podium to address the committee. Will staff please call the first virtual speaker?
Our first speaker is Zach Hauser, followed by Jessica Leach in Upper Council Chambers. Zach, are you on the line?
I am. Thanks for having me. So I just wanted to say that Phoenix is in a housing crisis, in particular an affordable housing crisis, with eviction rates being so high and the amount of homelessness in the city. I think it should be in the city's interest to prioritize this issue, and that the committee should vote for all funds to be put towards housing-related proposals and innovation programs, and to also help with, also just to help with the affordable housing shortage. Again, like, I see it every day, just the amount of like homelessness and I guess the wrongs that are happening to so many people. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Are there any more virtual speakers?
There are not.
So at this time, we will invite our in-person attendees to the podium.
Our next speaker is Jessica Leach, followed by Pamela Schwims.
Good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Jessica Leach. I'm the Executive Director for the Southwest Center for HIV and AIDS. I hear very loud and clear the need for affordable housing across the city of Phoenix, and I directly understand the impact that homelessness has on our community. The Parsons Center for Health and Wellness houses not only the Southwest Center, but also Glisten, Valleywise, and 1 in 10. For the Southwest Center in particular, we serve through outreach and primary care services over 30,000 people a year. Of those communities, over a third have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives, and over 50% live below the federal poverty line. We serve the most marginalized communities, and not just in downtown, but throughout the entire city. Our need is incredibly real because people who come to our center are housing insecure. They are members of the LGBTQ community. They are members of the BIPOC community, and access to healthcare is almost non-existent. We desperately need the funding to expand so that we can continue to serve our populations and ensure that those people living unhoused, people who are housing insecure, everyone has access to barrier-free healthcare. I would also like to invite the members of the subcommittee out to the tour the Parsons Center for Health and Wellness, if it's not horribly inappropriate. I'd love for you to be able to see the impact that we have on our community, the clients that we serve, and how we make a difference in this population every single day. Do you have any questions?
I'm not sure, are we taking questions, just making the comments?
I just thought I had 27 seconds left, and I covered my entire page, so I was like, y'all.
I'm not sure ever, Jessica, I've seen you that swift before.
Honestly, I did have introduce yourself at the very top of my list. I forget to do that. I just dive in. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, if it was the committee's prerogative, you could ask questions under this format.
Thank you.
For future.
Thank you, appreciate that. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Pamela Schwims, followed by Marion Guzman.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, and the other attendees here. My name is Pamela Schwims. I am the board chair for the Southwest Center for HIV/AIDS. And I'm really honored to be the voice for that body here this morning. I'd like to establish a point of agreement and then a couple of points of differentiation for our project. I I think we can agree, and was supported by what Jessica said, that we serve the same community that all of these projects are designed to serve. So let us look at what might be a point of differentiation for us. One, we are shovel ready. Because of the type of planning that we do and looking at the increasing need for the services we provide, we are thinking forward and understanding the needs not only of the Southwest Center, but of the other tenants in the Parsons building, Parsons Center for Health and Wellness, which is a city-owned building. Everyone's needs are increasing rapidly, and we will be ready to go when the funds are available. In addition, there are no ongoing operating costs or maintenance costs, as the tenants will cover that type of expenses. And as a result of that is that there would be no long-term budget implications for the city's general fund. In addition, with 31 seconds left, I want you to recognize that we recognize the balance that has to be achieved here with the needs of the community and the resources available. We're here because we are running out of resources to serve these communities and understand that balance tremendously well. So my request is that you fund us in a priority way so that we can move forward. Thank you for hearing me.
Our next speaker is Marion Guzman, followed by George Childs.
Hi, committee. My name is Marlon Guzman. I've been living with HIV for it'll be 33 years on the 25th of this month. I've been a part of the Parsons Center, where it used to be McDowell Center, since 1998. I take advantage of their health and wellness, their nutrition, the therapy, mental health, and they do different services throughout the year. And just here to support them and know that they've been a big help in my life. I'm the youngest of 9 kids, and I had another brother who passed away with the same disease I got. And when I came back here from California in '97, they threw me this big old party and said, "Martin's not going to be here." Everybody came, California, all my friends came, and I couldn't figure out why. It was because they thought I was going to die. And here I am still, so.
Our next speaker is George Childs, followed by Barbara Harding.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson and Subcommittee. My name is George Childs. I am on the Executive Board of Southwest Center, and I'm also a product of the amazingness of Southwest Center and the Parsons Center as a whole. I moved here in 2016 and looking for services, and I found Southwest Center as services as for my doctor, for my case management, and for all those things. So I was one of the people from that underserved community that was looking for the housing, looking for the jobs, looking for the medical treatment, and looking for everything that was necessary to keep my life going and to help it increase in its positivity. And they were able to do that. You know, as we know, or as some may know, in 2019, HIV started to decrease by 8% nationwide. But as of 2022, the rates of HIV and syphilis are on the rise once again here in Phoenix. And that's why the services of Southwest Center are very important. And expanding the services will help 20% more of the community by expanding those services. And these services are very important and very needed within the city, because especially with the underserved communities such as the homeless community and the unhoused community, the services of Southwest Center are very important because of location, one thing. Because as we know, in the downtown area, we have a large number of the homeless population that are here. And by having the services where it's easily accessible by public transportation and by actual walking, this is a great center. And with the expansion of the services, we'll be able to help more people and to help change the lives of many people just like mine. Thank you.
Our next and final speaker is Barbara Harding.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Barbara Harding. I'm from Valleywise Health. I'm the Senior Vice President of Ambulatory Care and the CEO of the Federally Qualified Health Clinics. As a part of testimony today and the Parsons Health Center, Valleywise Community Health Center McDowell is located in the Parsons Center and has provided care for those that have HIV/AIDS needs. And during the past year, we served over 4,000 people living with HIV/AIDS. And many of those individuals are homeless or have housing insecurity. They oftentimes live at 100% of the federal poverty level. While we continue to make great strides, as our previous speaker said, we are not decreasing the incidence of HIV/AIDS in our community. Therefore, our health center is needed for providing those services in addition to the Southwest Center and the other centers in the Parsons Center. At this time, the Parsons building space has been exhausted. There's a need in our particular area for increased lab services, exam rooms, and additional support services, wraparound services to support the population. Along with all agencies housed in the Parsons Center for Health and Wellness, we join together to support the community impacted by HIV/AIDS. Valleywise Health encourages the city to prioritize the eradication of HIV/AIDS in our community by recommending funding support for the Parsons Center for Health and Wellness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that was our final speaker.
Thank you. Thank you for all of those who came today and took time to make comments. So this concludes our public comment period, and thank you to all those who participated. As a reminder to our committee, our task is to develop a rank-ordered list of projects for the executive committee. We have heard from the public during our 3 meetings, as well as the public hearing hosted by the executive committee last week, which I attended virtually. Staff has also provided the subcommittee with public feedback reports ahead of each meeting. The staff presented the results of the voluntary ranking exercise that committee members completed. To remind the subcommittee and the committee, those results are not binding and are only intended to provide a starting point for us today for discussing our recommendations. Before we start the deliberation, I open the meeting briefly for subcommittee members to bring up any additional questions for staff. I did want to make one comment. Member Swanton had, in our committee minutes, had requested PCA to submit a letter, which they did. So did everybody receive that letter and have a chance to look at that as well? Okay. So I just wanted to remind people of that as well. So, yes, Member Behrens.
There was a question I think that was outstanding as of last meeting about whether if we were to fund an additional housing gap funding program, whether that would be legal per the requirements for bonding. So I just wanted to verify that it would in fact be an appropriate inclusion in a bond program.
So thank you for that question, and we'll ask staff to, for the gap financing, we'll ask staff to answer that question around eligibility for bond funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. It is an issue that we need to discuss before the committee undertakes the ranking process. For those who may not be familiar, in short, the gift clause of the Arizona Constitution prohibits state and local governments from giving financial gifts to private entities. So, but the specific terms of each project in terms of the gap financing would need to be evaluated to determine whether using city funds for gap financing would comply with the gift clause. So any city-owned properties that needed gap financing would obviously be eligible, But in terms of any privately owned properties, it would depend on the specifics of each project. So yes, it is possible, but we can't say a blanket statement at this point. And also our attorney can also address any like legalese questions about that. So in short, depends on the project.
So thank you. Thank you for asking that question. So that's a clarity we needed to have. So, and we have another, Member Feaster, another comment.
A couple of questions. On the Parsons Center, since it ranked a little bit lower, is it possible for other funds, either like philanthropic funds or something, to be used to help with some of the financing of the capital?
Madam Chair and Vice Chair, that's I would say yes. That's a question probably for the project owners, but I would think that absolutely, if there's other funding sources, that would be available to. It's an option for them to seek private funding as well.
So one of them that I sort of knew that answer. And one of the things, Jessica, I forwarded your proposal over to the Arizona Community Foundation, who has a 1% community impact loan fund, and asked them to follow up with you. So I can connect that. But at a 1% interest, they can do up to between $2 and $4 million. So that might be helpful as a way to move quicker. And then it becomes something more manageable because you do have income streams coming in. And so I can help you explore those other opportunities with my philanthropy hat on. So there may be another way to address some of that. So just to put a pin in that. And then I have another question. We broke it up when we voted on both separately congregate, non-congregate. Would it increase the flexibility of the city if we merged those because you don't know exactly where you're going to go, and there may be, the money may be better served in doing those pocket areas or some collaboration? It may not be just a hotel. So as we're deliberating, would one option be to combine those two to give the city kind of the ultimate flexibility to be able to partner and take advantage of other opportunities as they arise? Because I know you've partnered with the city or the county and the state and other cities and the ARPA. So would that help to merge those and give you that flexibility?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, without a doubt, that would be very helpful to provide maximum flexibility because depending on the opportunity and the time frame, what is available at the time, it could go whatever if it advances, funding could go to whatever, either congregate or hotel, or in a pocket shelter. I would think it would be congregate, but if there was a pocket shelter that was non-congregate, that would provide an opportunity.
Thank you for that response. So the congregate shelter ranked 2 and the non-congregate ranked 7th. So I think with what Member Feaster is asking is, should we just combine them to say congregate or non-congregate to provide the city with the most flexibility in selecting a shelter? And I just want to make sure all the committee members know the difference between congregate and non-congregate, if there's any questions about that. That seemed to make sense to everybody.
And
I don't think we have to vote on it. I think just when we're in our deliberation, if that makes sense, giving the city the most option to either use congregate or non-congregate.
And we may not, go ahead.
I guess for clarification, non-congregate, does that include the eligibility for leases, or they have their own space versus more communal space? How does the city define the two criteria?
Madam Chair, Member Centers, I'm going to have Rachel Milne address that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So non-congregate would mean every individual or family gets their own space, whereas congregate is more of a general setting with lots of people.
Okay, any other staff questions? Member Chapman?
Madam Chair and staff, my question is, in the minutes, we had an extensive kind of discussion about the 7.5 million and the reason that it was not ranked high, and that there may be other opportunities, federal funding for that, and it wasn't put in the prioritized list. Can you just clarify that for me so that I make sure that I understand whether or not there are other funds, and if there are, what the timing is associated with that?
Madam Chair, Member Chapman, thank you for that question, members of the subcommittee. That is true that the reason that we as staff did not put forward a project that was, for a shelter is because of the availability of funding from the federal government. So we have a lot of funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA dollars, that are available that we have set aside. It's approximately $100 million, and those are still in the pipeline. So we need to spend those in the next few years, and that funding, much of it will go towards shelter, congregate and non-congregate, hotel conversion, congregate shelter. In addition, we're partnering with Maricopa County. They've been a partner in our Washington shelter, and the state of Arizona Department of Housing has also been a partner, and both of those entities, I can't say they're going to give us all the money, but we have been working with them on projects that make sense. One example of that is investment out of ARPA dollars that are going to St. Vincent de Paul's Ozanam Manor, and the state, county, and city, actually city and county, I'm not definite on the state contribution yet, but have both given $6 million towards that project. And so for that reason, we prioritize the preservation of our affordable housing units and gap financing for choice among the other ones that we put forward. I would also add that another consideration that we had in mind for the bond program, I don't think I'm arguing against shelter because we can always use more funding, but is the operational costs of providing it. And that was a consideration for the organization and what we put forward, and recognizing that all of these funds that we're investing at the state, county, and city level will have to come up with the operating dollars for that when those funds expire in a few years. And so with that in mind, then in addition to whatever was added with this, we would also need to fund the operational costs of that project as well. So, but recognizing it's a priority, we knew there was interest, and we provided, if the committee wanted to do something, here are the options that we would recommend as staff for additional investment into this area. So that's a very good question, and there's a need. I think there's a tremendous need. There are other sources that we're tapping into right now to increase our bed capacity and services, and I'll leave it at that.
Do you have another question? No.
My only question is about timing and the release of the funding. Does anybody have any idea when you would have access to $7.5 million to do the project?
I'm going to defer that to budget and research, if that's okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Funding would be available in the fiscal year 25 budget to start bond fund expenditures. So that would be July 2024.
For the bond funds, or were you
No,
referring to?
I'm talking about for
ARPA
the federal
dollars? I think
funding.
other
Is
funds.
the
Are
federal
those funds
funds?
available
Oh,
now?
apologies,
Yeah.
apologies. Madam Chair, Member Chapman. Yes, they're available now. They have been allocated. There were 2 tranches of ARPA dollars. The second one was approved about a year ago, the first tranche, and a little over a year ago, and then the second was approved in June. So, so that total amount that's available is available right now, and we are in the process of delivering on those projects, identifying properties, looking for to implement right now as we speak.
So let me just be clear. I'm a little The $7.5 million that is allocated potentially and ranked here, that out of your funding pot right now, that could be allocated out of your federal funds for 7.5.
Madam Chair, we have well over, and
Okay.
Member Chair, we have well over $7.5 million currently available for us to invest in these.
Okay,
this area.
thank you.
And we received a listing of you provided that, just so in case you didn't get to look at that, of all the amounts and what you are currently spending on, and you will have more, like at least a third tranche, correct?
Madam Chair, no, that it's just the two tranches.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So I have just one clarifying question too, that when we make our recommendations, we're going to recommend projects as well as we have to have a dollar amount.
Madam Chair, that's correct.
So there are a couple of categories that didn't have a dollar amount. We just need to keep that in mind. Any other questions before we begin? Any other questions before we deliberate? Okay, Member Feaster?
So there's several things in here, and I'll pull the innovation in affordable housing, which I think is a great idea, but it lacks specificity. You weren't, it just was kind of out of scope. So, and then I'm guilty of it as well, of bringing up ideas like co-location and some of those things. So things that are kind of out of scope for what we're supposed to be doing, but are still valuable suggestions and ideas. Is there a way that we can put, if you will, a footnote on our program, on our package? So if it's out of scope, but we want to make sure the executive committee and city council understand our preferences, and I would even say we don't have a dollar amount, for example, of building housing on Cesar Chavez Senior Center, but we'd like to encourage that to try and look at that and move that forward as a concept. Is there a way that we can put the equivalent of a footnote on our plan to, sometimes they do a concurrent resolution in the legislative parlance, but can we do something like that that sort of talks about the will of the committee that's kind of outside the scope of the dollars on the bond?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, absolutely, that is something that could occur in the report that will be provided to the executive committee. Recommendations that the GeoBond subcommittee is making that maybe either didn't make it in because the project didn't quite fit, or things that are priorities that as community members and subcommittee you would like to see the city take a look at and proceed with.
Madam Chair, could I add to what?
Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Pfister?
Let me just make a comment about that,
Okay,
and I'll come
yeah,
right
go
back to you. So just, there was a lot of discussion about the co-location of services, like if you have a senior center, could there be housing located? I noticed that PCA was talking about land trust, city properties that could be converted to land trust, things like that we might want to, they're not in the scope of the bond project, or they don't have a dollar amount, but they're still kind of concepts that our committee might want to move forward. Okay. So, yes, Member Vidalis.
So, Chair, Committee, Vice Chair, Feister.
Suzanne.
To I think answer some of your question about the innovation. I did get a packet from Director Montez. She was very helpful in helping to educate me on the process to make this a bond eligible project. And I would ask that the subcommittee consider adding that to this as a request, even if it takes another meeting before we can make a final recommendation on it. I met with a number of housing advocates, including the the young man Department of Housing Representative Christian Solario this past week to dial into what could be done with that Housing Innovation Fund. So we're completing that document that Director Montez gave to me, and hope to have that wrapped by sometime early next week. What we've learned is that we could achieve what was recommended if we just stuck to a single family auxiliary dwelling unit, and a duplex, pre-approved plans. We've learned from Los Angeles and the state of California that they were able to achieve 52,000 units that have been permitted for auxiliary dwelling units since 2017, with last year producing 16,000 units, and in 2021 producing 20,000 units. So, looking at the affordable housing plan that the City Council approved of trying to produce 50,000 units by 2030, I really believe that if we put this in place and we put those plans, we might say have the same response that California has had in producing nearly 52,000 units since 2017 at a minimal cost. The budget that we have identified thus far is about $1 million for that. So, I'll provide more details as we do deliberation, but I do want to let you know that I've learned what that process is, and I'm trying to get it so that we have real numbers associated, and it does fit within the scope of the bond.
And you can look, Tucson has an ADU ordinance that they've, as part of their housing plan. So, because we helped fund making sure that gentrifying neighborhoods had what they needed to build those. So we don't even need to look west, we can just look south for a best practice. So.
Any comments staff want to make, or are we, go ahead. Deputy City Manager.
Yes,
Montes.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Mr. Vilas, in terms of the accessory dwelling units, that is something, there's a lot of interest from the community in having a program and proceeding with that. It is a recommendation from the Strategies to Address Homelessness Task Force, and it's something in the Housing Phoenix plan. Kind of where we are as a city, just so that the committee is aware, is that in terms of the zoning and the ability to do ADUs, it's not actually quite so simple in our Phoenix zoning ordinance yet. And so that is something that the planning department is looking at, how they might bring that back through the process to address it. But right now, and if you're looking at a single family zoning, you couldn't have you wouldn't be allowed right now to do an accessory dwelling unit, because that would make it a multifamily like zoning. And so I'm not an expert in talking about the zoning myself, but for that's so just so that the subcommittee is aware, if that's something you want to proceed with, it would be recommending something that we don't yet have a way to do in the city right now. So not to say it wouldn't be in the future, but there's a whole lot of policy decisions and bodies in between, before that we need to go through, and changes need to be made in order to implement something like that. So, but like I said, there is a lot of support from the community and interest in doing that. So just wanted to provide that caveat.
I appreciate that. And that could even be one of the suggestions that we move forward as a concept. Yes, Member Behrens.
Yeah, just one point of clarification. So, just to make sure that everybody's clear, accessory dwelling units currently permissible as of right in certain areas in the city, just not everywhere. Is that the point, or is the statement that they are not permissible anywhere right now?
Madam Chair, Member Behrens, I'm reluctant to speak definitively on an area that I'm not an expert in. My understanding is that we were needing to work through issues in the zoning ordinance in order to allow them. So that's something I don't think we have anyone from planning in the audience. I can see if I can get someone here while the committee is discussing to address that, if it might be possible.
So it was my understanding that, yes, not currently permitted many places in the city, but not, there's no blanket ban on accessory dwelling units, is
No,
my
that's correct.
understanding.
That is correct. There's no ban on them. It just really depends on the zoning. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your questions, and then cities for your responses. We are responsible to complete a rank-ordered list of projects and recommended funding levels to send to the executive committee. I think I've said that about 20 times now. The next order of business is to begin deliberating on our initial ranking I've been advised that Mr. Swanton will recuse himself from participating in our initial ranking. Will recuse himself for participating in discussion involving the Choice Neighborhoods projects. Yes. Then we will hold a separate discussion. So we will talk about all the projects first, all these projects, except for Choice Neighborhoods. We'll remove that from the initial discussion. And then after we've completed a ranking of the projects, if we're ready to do that, without Choice Neighborhoods, then Member Swanton will recuse himself, and then we'll have another discussion if we want to rank Choice Neighborhoods and insert it back into our ranking. For example, if we had, right now it's McDowell Senior Center at 4, and we decided to rank Choice Neighborhoods at 3, then that would move other projects down. So I just wanted to explain that process. We've been informed about the gift clause. That's good. So at this time, I'd like to begin deliberating on the initial ranking, and the initial ranking will not include the Choice Neighborhoods project. It may be modified, and then we'll later modify that. Would a committee member like to make a motion for initial ranking, or do we, let's take questions at this point in time and comments? Member Vidalis.
Chairwoman Devine, I want to thank researcher Miller for providing that document where we would all need to get in order to achieve that $500 million number, because I think that's helpful as a baseline to understand where we're headed, and I'm trying to be mindful that all these projects are important, you know, every one of them, and so I appreciate the showing that came out today to the public to, you know, Parsons really, you know, you guys came out in force, and it's appreciated that you come out and support, you know, your community and what you're doing in the city. So that $47.7 million number has been sticking in my mind since he mentioned that about a half hour ago. So what I would propose for discussion with the subcommittee today is, based on my research for the property preservation, everyone sees that as the #1 issue. And I'm not going to even go into rankings, because I think all of these are equally important to the city and to the different departments. But I would like to reach that $47.7 million as a committee to show that we're being responsible and understanding that there are other needs throughout the city and all the different departments that need funding. So with that said, I would like to propose that, as it's listed, regardless of ranking, that we could achieve that $47.7 million request and move that up to executive committee simply by reducing the $33 million requested by property preservation in half to $16.5 million. Funding Parsons partially up to $2 million. Funding the gap financing up to $2 million. And then the housing innovation at $1 million. And I know we're not going to discuss the choice neighborhoods, but if we reduce that from 21.2 to 10.6, that would put us at 47.8 million. 47.8 million, so we would be about $100,000 over if we were to propose that. So every one of those items would get funding with that proposal, and we would meet a deduction to support the other cities' needs and all the other committees. Those are what I would like to throw out as a discussion.
Thank you. I wanted to let you know that the city staff have the mechanism to move these around as we do it, but it was recommended that we don't move it around by individual persons, individual members, or move it around a lot. So I did try to capture, you might have to remind me.
I will, I wrote it all down.
I did try to capture that. We might want to have a little bit of discussion about, I don't think we have to stay to the 47 million, our committee is 61. I appreciate your comments about being responsible. for the executive committee. But I think that's something that we could do. We could very much do is do our part to not make it more difficult for the executive committee, but we could also recommend more than that.
And my only basis behind those, Chairwoman, is that a lot of after evaluating the current capital needs assessments, those properties do show that they have the ability to pay for those funds themselves. I'm not saying it's going to cover all of them, because we only have 4 of the 19 apartment complexes covered in those documents. But if they discover, at least it leaves it up to them to find that additional money, and there's still at least 50% of what they need in the next 3 years to provide that. And then the same thing with Choice Neighborhoods.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
I apologize, but I need to remind the committee we cannot discuss choice at all during this part of
Okay,
the
sorry.
discussion.
I'll wait.
So we need to omit that entirely
Okay,
from
I'll
the
omit that.
discussion.
I want to go to Member Ellis.
Apologize. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a few comments on things that have been happening. I want to say I agree with Suzanne about combining those two areas as far as the shelter and the non-congregate shelter. I think a lot of that will depend on the market, what is renovated and what is purchased, and I would leave that up to staff. But I do want to address still the need, even though there are currently plans for additional shelter beds, that the need is way beyond what is currently being built. Sadly, there were still over 800 people around the Human Service Campus last week that were not sheltered. There were 900 people sheltered in that area. SRP and the Bureau of Reclamation have pulled everybody, not pulled, but everyone has to leave the canals and the Tempe Town Lake River bed. And they estimate that there's quite a few hundred more people that will be needing services based on that. So I just wanted to clarify that even though things are being built, the need is gigantic, and people are still continuing to be displaced. And then I really appreciate what you've done as far as the, making us responsible and coming down. But, I know that the other committees aren't necessarily doing that, and I wouldn't want our committee to be punished. So I know that you're on the executive committee, and if we do end up going in that direction, I would like you to be an advocate for us being responsible, because I've seen these things happen before where, okay, we need a 20% reduction, and then every committee gets reduced by that amount, and we've already reduced, so that wouldn't be fair to our committee. So if you could just continue to be an advocate if we end up doing that, because I know the other committees don't have that philosophy.
I appreciate that, but I'm not a member of the executive committee.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought every chair
I
was
am?
on the executive committee.
Oh.
Yes, every chair is on the executive committee, yeah.
Yeah,
we're
Congratulations, Madam Chair.
Chairperson to support our committee. Okay, all right. Never mind, I take that back. And I wanted to just say, too, I think that if you look at the categories of the funding as well, housing certainly sits probably as one of the highest priorities. So I would hate to, at this time, make it easier for the executive committee and really advocate for housing, whatever makes sense, that we don't set an arbitrary figure. It might be even more than the 61 if that's what we feel really strongly about. But let's see how we get there.
And then I have one
I
final
appreciate that.
comment. I will say that it is very difficult for me to rank these when we don't know what some of the funding amounts are. So, I'm really having a hard time with the gap financing, because is that 50 million? Is that going to take up the whole thing? If we're trying to be responsible, we don't know what the amounts are. That makes it really difficult. But I know that those were last minute things put in, so there's no way to come up with it that quickly by today. So, but I just wanted to say that it does make it difficult.
I appreciate that. Other members?
So I just want to register my confidence in the executive committee, in both Chair Devine and the other members of it. I see our role, I think I have a different view than some others on the subcommittee. I think the ranking is very important and coming up with funding levels, but I would just urge the subcommittee, if you believe, given the historic moment in which we are in, that all of these things should be included in this bond. I have faith in the executive committee. I think that the subcommittee should vote for the things they think are priorities here, rather than putting a footnote and saying, hey, this is a really good idea that we found. I think we should register our support for including them in the bond, because this isn't the final say here. This is, there are ample safeguards to ensure that we hit the number as a city that we're supposed to hit. So I think if housing needs to be prioritized at a higher allocation amount than it is now, I think we should do that, up to the point of funding everything on the list, voting to fund everything on the list.
Appreciate your comments. Other members? Member Feaster?
I have no qualms about going over the 47 million. I believe this is a huge problem, and it needs to, and the city has done a fabulous job with the ARPA money, but this is a place, it also is a political statement for our bond, and showing that the commitment to housing by the city is really critical. So with all due respect to Victor, I think we need to make a statement about how important housing and affordable housing is. And I have to respectfully disagree with not funding. The city needs to take care of the properties that they own. So I would not want to take out the Cesar Chavez Senior Center and the McDowell Senior Center and the property preservation. We have a responsibility as a landlord and as providing these services to make sure these buildings are safe. And some of these are old buildings that need help. So I would be much more comfortable with the ranking that we have, that we as a group put together with, I wouldn't mind a small reduction in the affordable housing property preservation, but I would combine the congregate, non-congregate. I would not put in as much money, maybe just stick with the 7.5 and give the city the flexibility, but I would really continue the renovations that we need to have happen, and then stick closer to the original ranking that we put together.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I concur with the Vice Chair's strategy for moving forward in the rankings that we have put together, and can't emphasize enough that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and so many things have been deferred since 2006. We're almost at 20 years for preventive maintenance for many and probably most city facilities. So the way that the current ranking focuses on taking care of existing assets, I think is critical for moving forward, especially given the uncertainty that we seem to be headed to right now with the economy. The previous bond program was deferred, stretched out, and we still have these needs, these unmet needs. And so I think the charity has to begin at home with the bond program, especially since you've got other options for some of the funding for some of these projects, and then there are just unknowns. As we talk about innovation and best practices, I think that is critical. It's critical across the board, and it's certainly critical here. I think the city has spent, I don't know how much time developing the affordable housing program and the input and all of that. I just think that there is a role to play for every sector and for all the means of financing. And I think it's critical that this funding be targeted for initially to catch up on the preventive maintenance. And so the ranking with the housing property preservation, the Cesar Chavez Senior Center, the McDowell Senior Center renovation, I just think those things are critical. And I'm glad to know that we've got other funding to leverage for homeless, and I know that there's never enough funding, but those 1, 3, and 4, and then the combination of 2 and 7, I think, are critical. And then we get into a much deeper discussion about the rest of the other more nebulous items.
Thank you, Member Chapman. I want to hear from the member centers and Jonovich and Swanton.
Yes,
Apologies,
Madam Chair.
I was just making sure you saw that, Ms. Jonovich.
Yeah, Member Jonovich.
I don't want to belabor what's already been said, but I agree with the rankings as we've had them here. Again, deferring to our own internal city facilities that constituents use and utilize, I think it's critical that the city maintains those at a level that the community would expect. I also agree with the combining of 2 and 7. One thing to keep in mind, and I did have one question, going into this, they did ask that we look at things that would not create ongoing operational costs. So I don't know if there's operational costs associated with those two. But the other piece to me is important. I'm also struggling a bit with the affordable housing gap financing program, not really understanding the cost and what that would look like, as well as the innovation in affordable housing. Would love to allocate some funding to the Parsons Center if at all possible. And I too, I'm not really in favor of cutting right out of the gate, trying to hit that 48. I think if we just prioritize and rank based on what we know, and then let the executive committee determine how they take all of that information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any other comments what the committee members have said. When I'm thinking from now moving forward for when we are going to be proposing this to the community and the need for affordable housing, that is a felt need within our community. So if we have I would be really opposed to decreasing the amount. And even trying to maybe think about increasing the amount that we propose to the executive committee for total funding for this package for us to consider.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Member Swanton.
Yeah, just a general observation that out of a $500 million bond to give us a $60 million number to start with for all housing, human service, and neighborhood needs in this city, fifth largest city in the country, is almost embarrassing. So, I think I agree with Member Behrens, we need to make a strong statement to the executive committee that this is just not enough for a city of our size. Secondly, I'd like to say that on the gap funding piece, I think what we heard loud and clear from the community in the last few meetings was that we need more money to produce more units, and that's really the only category in the group of projects we're talking about right now that actually produce more affordable housing units. So I understand it lacks specificity, and maybe we should come up with a number today.
I think we have to.
And just propose something to the executive committee, but I think it needs to be in there to be responsive of the need to create more housing units in our community. Thanks.
Since no one's made you want to make a recommendation on an amount?
Oh, boy. I would start with 10 million.
Is it about, what per unit, what's the typical cost for affordable housing?
What is the per unit cost for?
Yeah, just on average.
That's
like 100,000.
Hard costs are, right now it's probably somewhere between 150,000 to 175,000 a unit. Just depends though. It's unit size, the target population, all those things, but $10 million won't go that far, honestly. I almost said 5 to start just because we're dealing with such small pots of money here. But if we want to make a statement, $10 million would probably fund 10 projects,
Okay, so, yes,
One
Member Behrens.
Point on that. My understanding of the gap financing is not like you take the gap program amount, divide it by the number of units based on the hard cost for the unit. It's really giving the city the flexibility to get projects over the hump. So, if a project is going to pencil, but for some off-site infrastructure that the city requires, maybe the city can fund that cost themselves using this. And And I agree that 10 million is a relatively low number given the vast need, but it could be a proof of concept that, you know, given the flexibility, the city can help some of these projects actually get done.
Deputy City Manager Montez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for a perspective, right now we're annually we do a call for interest for gap financing out of our federal home dollars, and we do about $6 million a year, and we do it at $1 million a project. Although that could, you know, the amounts could change in the future, maybe up. So in terms of the per project, but just to give the subcommittee a you know, perspective of what we're doing now and compared to the 10 million.
So I'm just going to recap. We'll continue, but I'm just going to do a little recap to say that in general, that most people have talked about combining 2 and 7 to give the flexibility on the shelter, whether that's both congregate and non-congregate. There was a question about funding the shelter if there's ongoing operation costs. But I think other people have made a case that homelessness is such. I also knew that there were 805 people unsheltered last week, 900 sheltered and 800 and some unsheltered. And then I heard that there's respect for kind of this list, that it was, you know, having respect for the initial ranking. We don't have to stick by it, but having some respect for people that did rank, and in general, that list is fairly supported by the members of the committee, and that we have a recommendation to add 10 million to the gap financing, that isn't allowable for city projects, and then project by project if it's a private project, privately funded project. And then if we were to recommend everything on the list, then there was a recommendation that people wanted to at least have some dollar amount for Parsons, whether it remained at 6.7 or some other dollar amount. And then the other category we don't have a dollar amount in is in innovation. So Victor made Member Vidalis made a recommendation for $1 million. So did I recap that to everybody's? And Member Ellis, I promise I will be a really strong advocate for our committee.
Madam Chair.
It's my life's work for 40 years. Yes, Member Vidalis.
My question is to Director Montez. So with that $10 million request, will we have to submit a document very similar to what you requested the process for the $1 million in innovation, and who would take over that?
Correct, Madam Chair, Member Vidalis. And yes, I did provide the packet as well, and the proposer, and in this case, Mr. Swan, would provide the information to proceed. Yes.
And then just some comments to, you know, about the, when I say the reduction, it was only for item number 1, affordable housing property preservation, and I get the concept of being a landlord and being a good landlord. But being a good landlord means that you're responsible for the units based on the income you have coming in and the expenses that you have for each property. So in order to be a good property manager, you have to manage these well. And I guess the deeper question is the city in Phoenix, should they be in the business of owning 19 apartment complexes when there clearly is not enough income, at least based on today, by the way the income is distributed to not just the properties but also the staff? Should we be in there? And I guess that's a deeper question, and that's not part of our charter here, but I think it's something that the public should know, especially, you know, the voters have to approve this. And why would you take more debt on assets that already are not being maintained well and not performing at the level that they need to be performing? So I really hope that the housing department and the policymakers will look at those 19 assets, because there's over $100 million in equity in those assets today. And so it's not part of what we need to do, but there are some immediate needs there that just won't get resolved, as Again, I know that you guys are kind of dismissing my research, but there's immediate needs this year, next year, and the year after, totaling over, these are just 4 properties, over $5 million. And right now, just with those 4 properties, 3 of those 4 have enough income to support their existing needs. I just want to make sure that that's clear and in the public square.
Thank you for your comments. Member Ellis?
Yes, and if I could just address that, since this is an industry I've been in for many, many years, I think that most affordable housing properties do not pay for themselves because people aren't paying rent that is market rate, and that's by design. So they're not supposed to, most of them aren't supposed to make a profit. And in this day and age, which a lot of rents are going up, I think I heard it stated that the rents there did not go up as much as the market did, so that it could stay affordable. So, I mean, I know as a taxpayer in Phoenix, I'm fine with my taxes going to help someone remain housed in their community. So I just wanted to make that point that it's not a traditional property. The properties aren't traditional to where they are supposed to be income generating. They're supposed to keep people from being homeless.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think the important part is that these 16 and the 19 assets are free and clear, which give them the ability to keep those rents very low. And even at the current income levels that they're at, there's significant net income coming in to support those needs.
Did you have a response, Deputy City Manager Montes?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Member Vilas, we hear you loud and clear. We hear your point. And I also want to note that in the last year, we were able to fund a new position specifically dedicated to asset management. And so, and the city has added 2 additional positions that were general fund positions for affordable housing within the housing department. But it is true that historically, there hasn't been a lot of general fund dollars put towards that. So, but to be clear, it has changed, and there is a huge commitment on the part of our city council and management in addressing all these issues you discuss. It's going to take us a bit of time, you know, and Wendell, our asset manager, came from the private sector. He has a tremendous portfolio background, related experience, and he's going to, you know, help us address that, looking at the rents and can they be increased a little bit? How much, looking at the, you know, the assessments that we're going to complete. All of these issues are important to us as well. And could we be putting more money towards it out of the cash flow? It's not that we're not using that cash flow to address maintenance needs. There are things that have to be repaired regularly, and those funds are going towards that. Can I tell you right now at a micro level for every property? No, I don't have that information in front of me. I also will tell you that that what we requested was even beyond the $33 million. So, and it's scalable. You know, if we could add more because there's a tremendous need. Do we have the specifics from each property? No, we don't, because we haven't done all the assessments. But we were happy to share with you what we do have. Santa Fe Springs, for example, we have found additional funding, which we're putting into HVAC and other systems in the property, but it does have greater needs as well. So maintaining this portfolio is very critical because it is, and it is an asset that it's owned by the city, and we would like to maintain it. So.
Yeah, I would thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. I would just like to say, too, that remember, many people have said it's been 16 years. This is a very common use for GO bonds. We haven't had a GO bond in 16 years. I personally don't think $33 million is a lot of money to maintain the number of properties. There's 16 properties. So I think if we're comfortable, do we have somebody that would like to make a motion on the ranking other than choice neighborhoods? Other than choice neighborhoods, do we have?
The ranking with funding amounts, or the ranking? Okay.
So I think we have to do funding amounts. Okay. That's one of our requirements.
So I have a clarification before we do that. In the combining of 2 and 7, the initial comment was that you would combine the two and you would keep the amount at 7.5. Is that correct?
That's correct, what I
Okay,
heard.
I just wanted to clarify. That's it.
It looks
Thank you.
like- Go ahead, Member Swan.
Well, before we do that and reduce that total dollar amount, what I'm hearing is that there's general support for going back to the executive committee with a higher amount. We have a $500 million bond. If we funded everything, rank them, of course, but funded everything at their current levels, including a $10 million fund for gap financing,
And $1 million for innovation.
and $1 million for innovation, would be right at about $100 million, $101 million, I think it is. Out of a $500 million bond, to take 1/5 of that and allocate it to housing, human service, and homeless needs in this city, I think is reasonable. It's a good number, and it shows respect to the issue, I think. So I would recommend that, we figure out what the rank is, because the executive committee is likely going to not fund everything we want, and I think the rank's going to be important, but that we maintain the funding level, especially as it relates to addressing our homeless issue and creating new housing units. So I would almost recommend that we combine those two items and keep the dollar amount at the full, combined amount. But
I would say the only concern I have about that is the operating too, the issue on
The
operating.
operating, and then the fact that you do have some opportunity to leverage the funding here. You have some funds, housing for shelter, as I understand it, that's available right now. And the urgency of now is that we need those units right now. So if we were going to shift some funding around, I would think 7.5, since it wasn't even in the initial request and was added, that 7.5 for the congregate or non-congregate shelters, I would think would be a good number.
and I could support that if others did. Yeah.
So I think we have a motion.
I just have a
Go
quick
ahead,
question
Member
about the
Ellis.
operating costs. Generally, the city of Phoenix contracts out these services to nonprofit agencies, and they're not responsible for those costs. The agency would be responsible. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Member Ellis, if it's our facility, who else is going to fund it would be my question. But yes, if we generally are not providing directly those services. We're contracting out to nonprofit service providers. However, if we own a facility and we don't have the funds to operate it, we can't rely on someone else coming. Lots of times the organizations have private fundraising, and they'll look to other government sources as well. All of those things happen. But if it's our facility, I think we would have the responsibility to make sure that the operational costs are there. Would love it if others would come forward and help us.
Right. I was just thinking, for instance, like the Human Service Campus and how they're adding additional shelter beds and that type of thing. And I know the city also leases its facilities out, like for Boys and Girls Club or whatever, for $1 a year. But
correct,
you don't necessarily fund 100% of their operation. So I was just making sure you're not hiring 100 city employees then to do this. It would be a different mechanism as far as staffing it.
Correct.
Okay.
We don't operate any of these directly, so apologies for misunderstanding that.
Vice Chair Feaster?
I will make a motion for a ranking that affordable property preservation stays as number 1 for $33 million, that we combine the acquisition of congregate and non-congregate shelter as number 2. I'll put in 15 million, so take the higher number. Number 3 for the Cesar Chavez Senior Center at 5.7. Number 4, McDowell Senior Center renovation at 1.8. Number 6, the Affordable Housing Development Gap Financing at 10 million. 7, the Innovation in Affordable Housing Program at 1. And let's throw in the Parsons Center for at least 3. And then still to be considered later would be the choice neighborhoods, but that would be my motion.
Is there a desire by the committee to have them, they can rearrange this for us. We just didn't want to do it unless there was enough support. Is there enough support? It's not the final, it just gives us to be able to look at what Suzanne's motion was.
I second the motion.
That would be helpful.
Is there a support to reorganize, have them go ahead and reorganize based on her? Okay, could you please do that for us?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, yes, we'll go ahead and work on reordering and try to be able to display what we believe the motion is.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question
Just one
while
moment.
you're waiting. In the snapshot that you provided us, which was very helpful, thank you. I love infographics. But there were gap financing already in, both underway, so 8 million for 611 units and gap financing of 12 million from ARPA dollars. So, and for your 8 million, you thought you could do 611 units. So in our plan, we were talking about 10 million. So is that close?
Yes, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Feaster, I would definitely give that take that as a good estimate of what we would say for, because it's the same concept, it's just a different funding source.
Okay. So I think what would be good to say is we have this, it's been working successfully, but it's clearly inadequate. And so the message we're trying to make is that more needs to be committed as part of this to as part of the city's bond.
And Madam Chair, Vice Chair, I would say that we get tremendous interest from the community for this gap financing, and there's a desire and a need for, right now we're giving $1 million to do more per project because the financing gaps are increasing. So I would echo what you said.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Member Vidalis.
we're going to have discussion before we vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this, I want to make sure, Vice Chair Feaster, is this your motion that we're looking at now? Can you just review that, please?
No, revised cost 15. Yeah, yes. Pardon?
I'll defer to
Oh, yeah,
Member
so,
Vidalis, and then I'll make.
yeah, again, I don't necessarily agree with the funding amounts based on my research, but I would support Vice Chair Feaster's recommendation if innovation and affordable housing be pushed up solely for the ability to produce more affordable units than any other program that's currently on this bond project. Again, just going to Los Angeles with them creating 20,000 units in 2021 and 16,000 accessory dwelling units in 2020, to invest $1 million and have the potential to replicate 36,000 units over the 2 years after this is funded, it helps us to achieve the affordable housing project goals of 50,000 units by 2030. And I would recommend that be pumped up to number 1 on the list.
Thank you for your comments. Member Aarons?
So,
Madam Chair, did we get a second on the motion?
We
I'm
do
sorry,
have a
I
second.
didn't hear it.
We do have a second
Okay,
from
thank
Member
you.
Chapman.
Thank you.
Yes.
so I would, I don't know if I would say number 1, but certainly the innovation program, I think it would make sense to put it above the gap financing program just because of the potential for a great ROI on that. I agree with Member Vidalis there. The other thing I wanted to propose an amendment just to say, because the Parsons Center project is at the lowest priority of the ranked priorities here, and because there may be some efficiencies captured by doing an expansion at one time, I don't think there's much risk in recommending the full amount that was requested as opposed to just 3 million.
So this is our motion. We have a second. We've had
I
two
would take
comments.
that as a friendly amendment.
Both of them, that the innovation be moved up above the gap financing. And that Parsons be recommended at the full amount, is that? And then Mr. Vidalis, a member Vidalis had suggested that innovation be ranked number 1. So what is your?
I would go with Member Behrens.
So
whether Member Chapman accepts that.
Could you repeat what you're saying?
Yeah, can you repeat what the change would be?
Yes, innovation would move above that affordable housing development gap financing. They would change places. And Parsons Center be funded at the full amount. Am I correct in that?
I had to get it going.
Deputy City Manager Montez?
Thank you. I just wanted to give one more caveat. Apologies, Madam Chair. We, as far as the Innovation Affordable Housing Program, I just want to make sure that everyone knows we're still, evaluating that for bond funding eligibility.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
just want to make that.
Do we need to put that in our motion, or do we don't need to do that?
Just assuming that it's.
We're
Yes,
just going to
assuming
assume
that
that it is an acceptable use.
And that's the same thing for the gap funding.
I think the gap funding,
gap-
my understanding is that has been determined, that if it's a city
Yes.
project, that's an allowable use. If it's a private project, then it has to be project by project.
And that
So-
documentation's already been submitted
Yes,
to
and
you.
the gap financing, that was something that I have research on already in terms of the, not the gift clause, but the bond eligibility, which is a separate issue. And it is, there may be a different kind of bond that's used, but it is eligible for this process. And that's information that I have already.
Everybody clear on that?
Yeah, the gap funding was in the previous bond too, so just for
Yeah, but
clarification.
they did mention that some things have changed in the last 16 years, so we
It
can't.
did change with respect to the gift clause issue. It didn't change with respect
Correct.
to the eligibility, correct?
So, Member Chapman, do you accept that amendment?
Accepted.
Okay. Pardon me? Yeah.
One amendment just with as we combine the congregate, non-congregate shelter beds for max flexibility, that's great. I would love to just propose combining the amounts for both. Those are providing the most, instead of just taking the higher amount, maybe taking the sum of both amounts to the 22.5 million, just so we can have, those are the most at risk, getting people off the streets and into beds.
I support that.
So are there comments about, I think you're saying both the 15 million and the 7.5 million? And then if we increase that, do we want to then look at its ranking? Because it could affect Cesar Chavez and McDowell and everything below it if we actually increase the amount of money. So I'm just going to throw that open. Suzanne, this is
I can't support
your
that.
motion. Member Chapman?
I won't accept that as an amendment. We had that discussion a little earlier about 15. It first started at 7.5, then now it's 15, now it's 22. So I would have to withdraw my support on that. But to your point, because if we bump that up to 22 million, everything below that, then, and we haven't even started a discussion about the choice program.
We
So-
could choose to increase the amount and move its ranking. That's just one choice we have. Go ahead.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Oh.
I just wanted to
let me go
comment as
Member
well because
Janovich. Go ahead.
one of those rankings was ranked at 7, and so what we've done is we've bumped it up to 2, and we've increased the cost. So I'm not real comfortable myself with increasing it again.
Other comments?
I have a comment, just to go back with Member Feaster and Member Center said, over 800 beds or 800 homeless today, unsheltered. And homeless is probably the #1 priority. So if I don't see why we would not support the 22 million, because the $15 million was specifically for the acquisition of the hotel. And then the $7.5 million was for the other project. So I would support what member centers recommended of 22 million, and that it is number 2 because it's homelessness, and it's a major priority for the city.
One, if what's on the table from member centers is not acceptable to others, I mean, I think just looking at the initial ranking that we had, if we kept a shelter project at number 2 and brought back another, I know that the reason, or my perception of why they were combined is because we didn't want to distinguish at this point between congregate versus non-congregate shelter. We wanted to give flexibility to the city there. A possible compromise would be bringing back, if we're funding at 15 million now, bringing back a 7.5 million line item below, and I mean, it doesn't have to, we don't have to restrict it to a congregate or non-congregate shelter, and putting it where it was initially in the ranking at 7.5. So we're basically flipping the amounts, and this both can be, it can be discretionary, one or the other, and so the second one could be like a discretionary fund or something for the purpose of shelter services. It's just a potential fix, solution.
So what I'm hearing that is that the shelter would remain at number 2 at 15 million, and that we would put another shelter project back in below, just above Parsons, where it was originally ranked, at 7.5 million. Is that what you're saying?
That was my thought, yes.
Member Ellis.
I'll confuse people even more. I understand that they were ranked, you know, that there was a lot of gap in between them. But it kind of bothers me that we then, after 7 of us voted, then we asked for a definition. I don't know if people really understood what they were voting for, and that they picked one or the other. I think that might have happened. I do support funding at the full amount and keeping the same line item, but I have a proposal, and I know there's already another proposal on there. But we've talked a lot about our first priority is preserving city assets. So what if we moved it below the senior center but above the innovation and affordable housing, so that we're preserving assets, and then we're talking about building a shelter, and then that kind of combines the 2 and 7 and puts it in the middle. So that's just, but I know that there's a lot of proposals on the table. So
I would accept that proposal as the motion maker.
And how about
I'm
the
good with
second?
that.
Okay. Did you get that? Member Ellis, do you want to restate that?
Yes, I can repeat it. Okay, so we would, number 2, so we're not going to create 2 different categories, but number 2 would then become number 4. So we would have affordable housing property preservation, phase 1, Cesar Chavez Senior Center, McDowell Senior Center, and then the acquisition renovation of shelter at $22.5 million.
So do we, more discussion, or do we have a second?
Madam Chair, could we clarify real quick?
Madam Chair, just so we can all be clear
Okay.
where we're at in this process, what we have recorded is Vice Chair Feaster's motion.
Motion.
There was a friendly amendment that Ms. Feaster accepted. There has
Okay.
been a second. We heard there was an amendment made by Mr. Centers. We have not heard a second for that amendment. Is there?
I second it.
So we would advise that you proceed with a vote on the amendment before proceeding with a follow-up amendment that it sounds like Ms. Ellis is proposing.
Yes, Madam Chair, procedurally, the only motion on the floor is the vice chair's.
Is the vice chair's
Is the vice chair's.
motion.
That's the only motion that's on the floor right now. So you need to vote on that one. If you have another motion to make, you could make a subsequent motion to that, but the only motion on the floor is the vice chairs.
So can I withdraw my motion and make another motion that encapsulates what the conversation has been?
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, you certainly can.
Okay, then that's what I'm gonna do.
And
So-
before we proceed, real quick, Madam, just wanted, we're scheduled to go to 11. However, you know, the room is available beyond that, but we are scheduled, so I just want to let that know. But there would be a hard stop at noon, so I don't know what the schedule of the committee is.
Okay, so let's see if we can get there in 5 minutes. So let's hear the new motion. We have a new motion on the floor.
Okay, the new motion is that affordable housing property preservation stays at 33 million as number one. Number two becomes the Cesar Chavez Senior Center at the current amount. Number three is the McDowell Center renovation at the current amount. Number four is the acquisition renovation of property for congregate and non-congregate care. And I heard keeping it at, going to 22 million. And then, 22? 22.5. And then the affordable housing gap financing at 10 million, the next one. So, and then they continue acquisition, or take out acquisition renovation, so, because you've combined those. The innovation at 1 million and Parsons at, or did we, I thought we moved innovation up
Above the gap finance.
above the gap financing. So one, affordable housing preservation. Two, Cesar Chavez. Three, McDowell Senior Center. Four, the congregate shelter. Five, innovation. Six, gap financing. Seven, Parsons. With, at Parsons with full funding.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, when you were reading item 4, I believe you indicated congregate shelter.
It's combined.
Combined
Congregate,
and non-congregate.
non-congregate, 22.5 million.
Thank you.
Clear as mud.
Okay, we have the motion. Everybody understand the motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have ready to vote? Are we ready? So, do we have to do a roll call, or do we just, all in favor?
Madam Chair, it'd probably be appropriate to do a roll call.
Okay, so do I just go down the line? I will start with Member Janovich. Do you understand the motion and the second?
Yes. Aye.
Member Chapman?
Yes.
Member Behrens?
Aye.
Member Swanton?
Aye.
Aye. Vice Chair Feaster?
Aye.
Member Centers?
Aye.
Member Ellis?
Aye.
Member Vidalis?
Nay.
So we have 8 ayes and 1 nay. All right, so next order of business is Mr. Swanton will recuse himself, and I'm hoping we can get this done, if we can continue. And then we would begin, we would then discuss choice neighborhoods, its funding, and where it would fit in the ranking. Member comments?
I have a comment. This is, we talked about how important it is to get stuff on the ground as fast as possible, and Choice Neighborhoods is exactly that. It's really an exquisite development, even despite Brian having a hand in it. It is such a good partnership. This was the worst public housing in Phoenix, the Luke Crone facility. And I've watched it, and Vitalist has been supportive of it, and really, we paid for extra community outreach to make sure this development spoke to the community. So that's how impassioned we were about wanting to make sure that it really centered community and had an equity focus. And this project has achieved that. So I would be very supportive of completing this because it has such good community outreach and it has met the needs of the community in in an area that's changing, that has gentrification, has expansion opportunities. So this is a really critical, I think, piece to the puzzle that is affordable housing in Phoenix.
Other member comments? And the amount was 21.5 million was the originally recommended amount.
21.2 million.
Thank you, Member Ellis, 21.2. Other member comments? If no comments, does somebody want to make a motion? Member Ellis.
Yes, I propose that we rank the choice neighborhoods housing gap funding at at number 5, just after the shelter item. It appeared that it was ranked 5th among the ranking that we did. So I would propose that it go at number 5.
At the recommended amount?
Yes, at the recommended amount. Thank you.
So we have a motion to rank choice neighborhoods at number 5, which would then drop innovation. It would fit right in between the shelter and innovation at the recommended amount of $21.2 million. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Other comments?
Yeah, just a question for staff. It was only a one sentence that was provided by Titus on that question on where those funds were going to be applied to, and he had mentioned construction costs. Is that where the entire $21 million would be allocated for the increase in construction costs?
Madam Chair, Member Vilalis, for any capital costs, and yes, that goes to construction, correct. It will only, bond funding is only eligible for the capital costs. So the specifics of each category of that, I don't have it right now, but yes.
And how certain are you that you would get the additional capital stack approved, since it's not totally secured yet with this allocation?
Madam Chair, Member Vidalis, you're asking for the additional financing.
Yeah, the $21 million.
Yes.
In the initial packet,
Yes, correct.
showed that it would.
Yes, we would be applying for low-income housing tax credits and looking for any other funding sources as well. So I can't give you a percentage. It's an excellent project. We feel comfortable that we'd have an excellent shot, but I can't give you a percentage certainty.
And so that will, $21 million will only produce 364 units, is that correct?
I'm going to defer to Aubrey to give the total number.
Madam Chair, Member Vidalis, can you restate your question, please?
Will the $21 million being requested only develop or build 364 units?
Yes.
The total project is 1,000 units, but for this phase, it's that number, correct?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? I'll do the same order. Member Janovich?
Aye.
Member Chapman?
Yes.
Member Behrens?
Aye.
Aye. Vice Chair Feaster?
Aye.
Member Centers?
Aye.
Member Ellis?
Aye.
Member Vidalis?
Nay.
So we have 7 ayes and 1 nay, and 1 recusal. So, okay. Okay, we have our motion, and I think we're ready to have, is there any other wrap-up we need to do, or are we good? I think
Have
we
another
could.
meeting?
Madam Chair, the only clarification, some of these projects are new and changes have been discussed during this meeting. So if the committee were going to adjourn, staff would be finalizing the package for the executive committee on some of the things that the committee has discussed today. So that would just be direction to staff to finalize these project submittals consistent with the committee's direction.
So the committee will then ask staff to prepare the final recommendations for the executive committee based on the motions and the votes that we took, the motions that were passed today.
We also had the conversation of the footnotes, so I think it would be good to, and I'd be glad to take a stab at drafting something for footnotes that could be discussion for the committee.
At our next meeting, could we look at footnotes at our next meeting, since it's not going to be, it's not something that's going to be ranked or...
Madam Chair, there wouldn't be a fourth meeting since you've completed your work, and the way the process is with the reports in the subcommittee is that the staff would work with the chair. So, and I'd be happy to work with both the chair and the vice chair to finalize the report and ensure that the correct footnotes and recommendations beyond the ranking is provided in that.
Is all committee members comfortable? Those were things like, the recommendation from PCA around land trust, the recommendation of putting services, housing where other services are, maybe the ADUs, and just those kind of things. Is the committee comfortable with that?
Would we have a chance to provide input on the footnote process with you? We can't do it that way because of...
No, Madam Chair, given the process that's been established is that the staff will work with the chair, but we would not be going back individually to committee members or having edits.
Could committee members provide input to the chair and the vice chair, just on footnotes, outside of a meeting?
Madam Chair, I believe that the open meeting law dictates that you discuss it in the meeting now, so let me consult the attorney.
So I would propose that we talk about co-location, the land trust, which Phoenix Community Alliance. I do think it's important to call out ADUs because they are very important, and this city should go through the difficulty of making them widely available here.